Hi there, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Canton.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And this week we're going to be talking about doing something different versus doing something wrong. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly roundup. And Dave, you can go first.
Okay, another episode of Seven Stones, written, polished, and published. They've actually sorted all 7 stones now, so it might be coming towards an end. I might have to actually think of something else to do on a weekly basis, or if I'm going to even do another weekly serial straight off, or if I'm going to take a bit of a break, see what else I can play with. What else apart from that? Mostly post Dragons and Magic release, because we got Origin to go free across Amazon. So it's now free on all the major retailers in all the countries. So I've been doing some mentioning of that in places, tidying things up, doing all the little admin things that technically you're supposed to do that are easy to forget, like registering it with the British Library and assigning the rights management with the various rights management companies and so on. So most of my week has been tiddly little admin really for that, and correlating the stats and seeing how well we're doing, which seems to be quite well.
Yeah, I mean, we've been discussing it just before the show that it's doing very well. Like, we're number 3 in dark humor, I think, in the US.
3 in dark humor in the US and in the UK, and 3 in TV, movie, and role-playing fiction in, I think, both the US and the UK.
And we were number 5 in fantasy in the UK of short reads, so 90 minutes or less short reads.
Yeah,
which is a great little category because it's very easy to rank in.
And really quite startlingly, we're number 8 for fantasy in Japan, I think, and 14 for fantasy in Brazil. So best-selling international sales, big sticker on the front of all of my books from now on, top 10 best-selling author Dave Higgins.
Yeah. So we could discuss a little actually what our strategy was, because it wasn't too complicated really.
It's just like slightly different.
Yeah, slightly different. So what we did was we wrote 3 books in a row without publishing any of them. So normally we'd publish one, then write the next one, publish that, and then write the next one. So we decided, okay, we'll try and write 3 in a row, because that's what Johnny and Sean did for their Invasion series. And then we laser focused everything on fantasy, sword and sorcery fantasy. So we made sure that the titles, we had a meeting just discussing titles. We made sure that they were all conveyed exactly what they are. So their origin, adventure, and sorcery, that they could not get more explicit of what they're actually about. The covers, we went to 99 Designs and we said to the cover designer, we found a cover designer that did previously had done fantasy books in the exact same genre, and we said we want something that looks like the other books in this genre, and he did an amazing job. And then everything we did from then on was focused on matching sword and sorcery fantasy combined with our idea of having role-playing game tropes and stats in the books. So it's kind of a combination of writing to market, but it's a market we both enjoy reading, and being very, very clear about what it is. So the title is clear, the cover is clear, the description is clear. Everything tells you exactly what's inside.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily I wouldn't call it writing to market, because we didn't start off with what do fantasy readers want to read, let's write that. Saying the cover the blurb, the title's choice, the keywords, and so on, I wouldn't really say that was writing to market. I'd say that was all helping the audience find the book. So I think the book would be the same, whether or not we'd brainstormed titles and covers and so on.
Well, I think it's the matter that we wrote to market is that we're the market. So we picked something that we both enjoy reading, and then wrote something we would enjoy reading in that genre. So that's kind of what I mean by write to market. Write to market doesn't mean that you pick a genre you don't enjoy and then write it. In fact, that wouldn't probably work very well. You pick something you love reading and then write something you would want to read if you hadn't written it. Is all I meant. And the other thing we did, of course, is beta reading over on my writing app. Which from the feedback, we got more feedback this week. I mentioned it last week, but we got more feedback this week from people who beta read, saying that they thought it was a way better book, Origin, than what they beta read. And what they beta read was something we would have published. Normally in our normal, like what we did for Green Star, that was the stage we'd gotten to where we would have put it out in the market. So yeah. So the beta reading tool, which is what I've done this week, I haven't done any writing again, has gotten to the stage where Dave's been in looking at reports, I think.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to the stage where I'm short 2 or 3 screens, and then all the beta reading stuff will work for everyone. So what I've done is I've got a login and registration screen and a user profile editing screen and a way to put in your books and series and a way to define reader groups so you can just give it out to one group and not to another. One thing I was thinking about was multiple rounds of beta reading. So if you have a book that, say, on your first beta reading round struggles and has major problems, you can try and fix those problems and then give it to another group who haven't read the first one and see if it's better. So what I've got left is a way to put the content in. I've kind of got a shoddy screen that falls over and is buggy, so I just need to fix that. And I'm making a really nice welcome screen, or at least I think it's nice, that looks kind of like Netflix. So I could actually share it. I can, maybe I can share it. I'll have a look. Give me a second. Make sure it doesn't fall over before I show it off.
Does it want to play? Does it not want to play?
It's just taking a second because I have to load Visual Studio and then I have to run it. But yeah, I should be able to share it now. Let's see. So can you see that? Internet Explorer?
I can see it, yeah.
So it's got what you were last reading up at the top. So you can just click on it and go straight into the reader. The next one is what's new. So authors that you're following, what books have they just put up for reading on Writer Tracker? The next line is what authors you're following have just put up for sale. So you can click here and you get all your different links. You can go to Amazon and buy a copy. And then at the bottom, authors you're not following, you can follow them. So who's new on the system and who might you want to follow? And at the moment, the monkey is, the gorilla is just a kind of a testing author. He's not actually writing books yet. So I'm going to fix this up. I'm going to fix up the way to put content into the system. And then I'm wondering whether I'll let people who are following the podcast, because there's about under 50 people who are listening and watching the podcast, just slightly less than 50. So that should be manageable to let into the system. So the important thing is to mention is that this is not a system that has readers in it. Like Goodreads, for instance, if you do all the Goodreads advertising and stuff, the readers are already there, and then you're just saying, hey, check out my book. This is a system where you already have people who would beta read for you, and you tell them, go over here and register, and then you can beta read on this system. Or I can share. Do you mind if I share the reports? I can share Origin because we've already dealt with it.
So show people what we've got.
So if I go to reader feedback and then Origin. So this is the report we got for Origin. So it tells you how many readers are at each point. So chapter 0 is the copyright page, so ignore that. So there was 15 readers at chapter 1, and then 9 readers finished. So we lost about half of them. And this is people, as Dave and I were discussing, this is people who are already fans. So if you're losing the fans, then the people who aren't fans, it's not very likely you're going to retain them. And then the ratings, you can see, it's like they start off high, people are enthusiastic, and then go down a bit and then drop a lot at the end. So we fixed all this kind of stuff. And then I got all kinds of different reports. I don't know if some of these might not work because Origin was done with an older system. So you can see that overall people thought it was good. The plot people thought was good. The characters kind of went okay / good. The world people thought was great, so they really liked the world. And then the sharing is like how likely they are to share with their friends. So there's all kinds of different reports I put in, and all the reports and things work, but at the moment there's no way for someone to put their book up. So like there's as I say, a shoddy way that I can put my book up, because I don't mind if it falls over and is buggy. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to fix up the rest of the screens. I don't know if it'll be this week, hopefully this week, because there's not too much work involved. And then by next week's podcast, people might be able to go. You might have seen there, it's writertracker.com. You can even go and register now if you want to. So yeah, that's about it for me this week. So we can go on to our topic.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking about was that I was thinking about George R. R. Martin, which is not unusual. We've talked about him a lot.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the fact that he kills the heroes. So one thing that prompted this was Gone Girl. I don't know if you've seen or read Gone Girl, Dave.
I haven't, no.
So I hated it. A lot of people loved it, but I absolutely hated it. So taking the assumption that it's not a good ending, which is kind of what I think. Do you mind if I spoil it for you, Dave, or you?
Not at all. Spoil away, mate.
So spoiler alert for Gone Girl, but Ben Affleck's wife disappears, and for half of the movie you're thinking, oh, he might have done it, or you're meant to be thinking he might have done it, but I wasn't. I was just going, what the hell's going on? And then it turns out she disappeared herself and framed him for her murder. So she didn't like him because he was cheating on her. So she staged a murder scene and then left and is hiding until he gets convicted of murder in a state where they have the death penalty. So that's fine, okay. But then at the end, she wins. So she's screwing him over. Like, he cheated on her, I guess he's slightly at fault. it's not great someone's cheating on someone, but framing them for murder and potentially killing them, that's a little bit worse.
Yeah.
So she wins. He then she gets him manipulated into a stage where he has to stay with her and be her husband because she's pregnant with his child. It doesn't make any sense, so don't try and figure it out. It made no sense. People loved this movie. People thought it was one of the best movies ever. I don't know what they got out of it. Anyway, so my whole thing was George R. Martin could write a series where the good guys lose, and I still want to watch the show. And people love reading the books, even though the good guys keep dying and keep losing.
Yeah.
Whereas Gone Girl, the good guy loses. Well, he's a mostly good guy loses, and I hated it. I was infuriated. Like if this was a TV show, I would not be watching the next episode, unless someone said, "Oh yeah, he kills her in the next episode."
It suddenly gets better.
Yeah, that's what I was, because I was watching this going, people love this. There must be some point at which it gets better. Nope, doesn't get better. So what is the difference between doing something different and doing something wrong? Is it that if you do something different, certain people are always going to say it's wrong? I think that's a given. Like if you write a Die Hard knockoff and anything, like there's a lot of swearing. There is in Die Hard. I don't know, that he doesn't save the girl at the end, she saves herself or something like that. People are going to say, oh, that's wrong. But some people might look at that and go, oh, that was a good twist. Is there a point at which it becomes just different, or is there a kind of a percentage of the audience that you need to have with you in order to count as just being different and unique and not just wrong? Or can you just say this is different even if your entire audience says they don't like it and it's wrong? What do you think, Dave?
Well, going back to the core, it's what you're writing for. I mean, if you're... Some people, like Stephen King, will sell lots of books. If they write a book, people will buy it. People will get it out of the library. And Stephen King says that the Dark Tower series was something he wanted to write that's different from the others. And it is different from the others. I like the Dark Tower series. I kind of get on with, but don't really like so much his other stuff. And he said that he didn't know what the Dark Tower was going to do, so he held off. But he wanted to write it, so in the end, he wrote it. And it's got a different audience. So I think if you scale that down to someone like us, who's got sort of 10, 20 books that aren't selling top of the Times bestseller list every time we release one, we could do the same thing. We could release a book that's completely different because we want to write it. But you have to do it on the understanding that it's not going to necessarily get you the same audience. I've got some short stories where there's one person who really loves them and other people go, nah, it doesn't work, it's not a proper story. Because what I was going for was something that isn't normal. I love Lovecraftian fiction. I love the idea of a universe where the supernatural isn't some malevolent force that you defeat by understanding it or blowing it up or whatever. that the supernatural is, the universe is not designed for humans. Humans just happen to be in it. Aliens just happen to be in it. These things just happen to be in it. And so the supernatural is, you're an ant walking across a motorway. And if you get splatted, it's not because a car driver deliberately chose to splat you. It's just because the universe has things that can splat humans in it. And they might not even notice. And you can do things. But fundamentally, you're living in a universe that doesn't care whether you exist or not, and contains things that are incomprehensible to you. And so I wrote stories based on that, where there isn't a clear ending where the heroes win, because something happened and the victory is still being alive at the end, which is great for Lovecraftian fans. They go, yay, the heroes survived. This is a victory within the Lovecraftian paradigm. But for most people, they want a clearer ending. So when you put in we've reached a stable state, but the survivors still don't know actually what happened, and they're just left trying to put their lives back together, people go, well, the story kind of tails off. There isn't a conclusion. And so I loved that story. I still do love that story. And there are a few people who really love it, but there are an awful lot of people who don't, because it isn't what they expect from a story. So I think whenever you go off the reservation, as it were, go somewhere that's different, there are going to be a lot of people who think it's wrong. And you have to accept that if a lot of people think it's wrong, then each of those people represents a whole other mass of people who will also think it's wrong, but you'll never find out about. So for every person who you think, well, this person isn't going to like it, that's 1,000, 100,000, whatever readers you're not going to get, because they're representative of the larger group. So for me, wrong versus different is more of a, do I want this story to really sell or not question, rather than are there stories that are better or worse?
So is that a case for pseudonyms then, or better branding?
Possibly,
or something?
Yeah. Possibly, I think,
because I'm considering that with my. So I had 2 readers contact me this week about my vampire book,
which is good.
Thanks. One reader saying, "Where's the next one? It's been like a month and a half, or 2 months actually. Where's the next one in the series? Aren't you continuing this?" Which 2 months is pretty darn fast. If I had written full tilt, it wouldn't be out now. And I still haven't started on it because I've been doing the writer tracker thing. But so she wrote to me and said, "Where's the next one?" And another guy wrote to me and said, "I hope you're not ever going to write another one."
Oh,
because he said, "This is just the same boring vampire stuff that we see all the time. And I like your other stuff better." So that to me, but I've said to this is one of my inner circle guys, and I've said to all of them that they're to be as honest as possible, because I appreciate that. Like, I'm not. Some people get very kind of wounded when someone says something nasty about their book. I kind of look at why more. I can kind of distance myself a bit more. Or if it's on an Amazon reviewer this week, for instance, said Hard Vacuum, I think was one, said, "This is the kind of book that gives independent publishing a bad name." But then what I did was I clicked on his other reviews and saw he was just reviewing kitchen utensils and stuff, and I went, okay, screw it, who cares?
Yeah.
So anyway, my inner circle, I've kind of been saying to them over and over and over, be as harsh as possible because I want honesty.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned on the podcast before that I had a cover for one of my books that I had done myself, and I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was amazing, but I thought it was fine. And I showed it to a graphic designer friend, and he said, yeah, that's good. And then I got feedback from someone saying, yeah, this looks terrible. I said, so I changed it and then said to the graphic designer friend, oh yeah, someone said this looks terrible. And he said, yeah, I knew it, but I didn't want to say. Like, he knew that it was terrible. He saw, like, he's a graphic designer. He saw, like, it was not a good book cover, but he was being polite. He didn't want to say it. So I would rather have honesty than politeness, which on the web app thing, I asked my readers, the ones that are beta read, this week if they would want their names to be anonymous when they're reviewing or when they're reading, because then they could be more honest. And they said no, because the impression I got was they want credit. Like, they want credit for the fact that they're beta reading. They don't want anonymous user 12 to come up. They want their name to say to the author, I am the one that's helping you. So I was wondering, sorry, I'm going a bit off topic, but I'm wondering, maybe there should be like a thing on the system that says, hey, if you get your book beta read, have a dedication page for the beta readers at the back or something, just saying thank you to blah 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 blah. Maybe. I'm thinking about it. Anyway, that was off topic. So for my point was going to be that for some of my readers, me doing a vampire book was me doing something wrong, because they're like, I like funny fantasy and you're doing vampire books. That's not what I want you to read of yours. But for another reader, it was just something different that she really enjoys. So in that case, like, she wants me to continue the series. I'm thinking that's a case for me unpublishing the book as it is and republishing it under a different name, but not hiding the pseudonym, just saying I also publish under this pseudonym. Like, I think Ian Banks publishes under two names that are practically the same.
Ian Banks and Ian M. Banks, yes.
Yeah, so maybe Simon F. Canton or S.F. Canton, or something that just marks it out as being a different category, but people can find the other.
Your initials are SF, and you aren't using that to the limit.
I think we talked about it before. It's a bit too on the nose. If I write science fiction, I'm SF Canton. Yeah. If I could go back, maybe it should be SF Canton for science fiction and fantasy, and then Simon Canton for paranormal. But anyway, so yeah, so that's a potential for kind of separating the different from the wrong, like actually saying explicitly, this is different. So the people who go searching out for it or find it through an alternative route or whatever, that for them it's not wrong because it's explicitly said that it's different. It's published under a different name because it's different. Whereas my Simon Canton name could then be funny fantasy and science fiction. Not necessarily like laugh out loud in every book, but has a humorous side to it. So that's a potential kind of way to mitigate it, because what you don't want is a lot of people saying this is wrong, because then you're just going to rake in a load of 1-star reviews. So again, going back to our series, if Origin had been called Battle Beyond the Stars and had stars and a spaceship on the cover,
yeah,
and then it was just a fantasy story. But we said in our author notes, yes, but this is on an alien world. They don't know that it's an alien world because it was colonized 6,000 years ago, and they've just evolved into a fantasy setting. That wouldn't go down very well, probably.
I could see a few people calling Swizz on that.
Hi, Ed. You hear us?
Hey, hello. I think we started late according to my clock, but
Yeah, we talked about that before we went live. America goes back tomorrow, whereas the rest of the world went back last week.
yes. Well, we Americans have to do things differently.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. Yeah, we realized that just before we went live that it was.
That's all right. I'll join you for the rest.
Cool. So we were just talking about what's the difference between doing something different versus doing something wrong, and we were saying that perhaps the difference is the expectations of the reader. That if you set it up as matching a certain genre or certain expectations, like your Cthulhu thing, Dave. If you had a pseudonym, someone doesn't like pseudonyms,
Sounds too much like Sudafed.
if you had a pseudonym,
I may not join you.
no, okay, no problem. If you had a pseudonym, Dave, that was Cthulhu Jones, that you published that story under, and other Cthulhu stories, which you probably could. Cthulhu's out of copyright. You could call yourself Cthulhu Jones. It might be a bit presumptuous. That would be very clear on what is in those stories. So the people who like that kind of stuff would might do a search for Cthulhu and find your stuff, and then they would go into that expecting that the heroes were just going to survive and not necessarily learn anything or conquer the aliens or whatever they happen to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of something I've been thinking about a lot recently is, we've just discussed it quite a lot, is dividing up your readers in a way. Like, so delivering to the readers what they want and not necessarily wanting to deliver to all of the readers.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we talked about our fantasy books that at the end of that series, so when they've read Origin, Adventure, and Sorcery, that then there's no point in sending them to Green Star because they're not necessarily science fiction fans, but we can send them. You okay there, Ed? Going on a tour of your house. But we could send them to our fantasy stuff because it would be a closer match.
Yeah.
I'm mostly just listening, so.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, can I mute you? Because there's a lot of kind of background noise and stuff.
Please, you know what? Mute me.
If I can.
Or I'll mute me.
We go, I think. Maybe. This is a weird control thing.
I can't hear him anymore. We might have got rid of Ed.
Wave if you want to come back, Ed. So yeah, anyway, so that's kind of what Chris Fox has been saying recently, which is that he hasn't been delivering his science fiction stuff to his Ed's back, maybe, to his paranormal audience because he wants a pure science fiction audience, at least at the start. Like he was saying, a good indicator of the audience that's reading your books is the also bots. because if the right people are reading it, your also bought should all be from the same genre. Whereas if you're just getting random people, like looking at Origin, I can see the number one also bought is adventure, so that's pretty good. And then we've got what looks like a sci-fi book, another sci-fi, fantasy with a rocket launcher. There's a dragon and a rocket launcher. Some kind of historical fantasy, looks like. Fantasy. Like, this is perfect also bots. Fantasy. Like, it's exactly what we want. Which is because this, again, is us pushing doors that are already halfway open, which is my Bitter End series. All the guys that are following me because of the Bitter End series are already fans of light-hearted fantasy, sword and sorcery fantasy. So what I've been doing that's been wrong in a way, but is that I've been writing in a lot of different genres. So I've got cyberpunk and fantasy and space opera and kind of Die Hard in space. Military sci-fi is what I've kind of ended up calling it because she's military and there's no common ground. So a lot of my readers, a few of my readers at least, have said that they did not want to read Hard Vacuum because they were fans of my fantasy series, and then they read Hard Vacuum and really enjoyed it, but they would not have, if it was some other author, they would never have read it. They just got bored waiting for me to. It seems I've got a lot of people who read at the same rate as you, Dave, because I got some emails from people say, one guy was saying, I might get to adventure later on today, but I've got another book I need to read first that I've just started. Is that Dave under another name or something?
No. I'm not actually that cruel. If it was me under another name, I'd have mentioned it by now. just mentioned that I pranked you.
Yeah,
that wasn't me.
But it just shows I've gotten in other emails indicating similar things, that people are reading multiple books a week at least. So even with that, they didn't want to read my Die Hard in Space thing because they were like, yeah, I like this author, but I don't like military sci-fi or science fiction in general or whatever it is. So that's another thing I've been considering recently, is whether another way of considering doing something different, doing something wrong, is how much you want to write something different. So what I mean is that if I've written this year, I wrote post-apocalyptic, a vampire book, the sword and sorcery fantasy is the same as I've written before, and that's it. And so I'm continually pushing against doors that are closed. So how much do I want to write something that's different to what I've written before, where I could write more sword and sorcery fantasy and get more and more readers doing that than I can get if I keep trying to do something different all the time. Which, if you go back a couple of years, I wouldn't have thought was the case, because it's all science fiction and fantasy, which for me is one big thing, or even speculative fantasy. I mean, if you even include some horror and that kind of stuff. But for a lot of people, it's not. Again, it's down to your goals, what you want to do. If your goal is to write whatever takes your fancy, then that's fine. But it's going to be constantly building an audience, and every time you build an audience, you get attrition on that audience, because they're only going to follow you as long as you're writing the stuff they enjoy, and then once you stop writing the stuff they enjoy, they start forgetting you, especially if they're reading several books a week. They've got a lot of authors to keep up with. Anyway, I think we've kind of talked that topic to death. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Dave?
No, nothing springs to mind. It's usual takeaway that is experiments can be good as long as you go into it knowing that the experiment could go horribly wrong. Having some idea of what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, everything's a learning experience, and it's going to be different for every author. So for us, the lesson out of writing Origin and that kind of thing is that there's a possibility for building rather than continually starting from scratch. But for other authors, they'll have different audiences. Like a lot of people, like Stephen King, going back to him as an example, most of his books are one-off books. So he's not necessarily, he's bringing audiences with his style rather than with his series or whatever, or that kind of thing. I mean, he tends to write mostly horror, but he's written plenty of other things, and there's plenty of people read all of it. So yeah, it's going to be different for every author, but for us, at least, the lesson from Origin seems to be that we have a door halfway open. Both of us write fantasy. That potentially, I don't know whether, I'm not sure, but next year, if we pushed against that door more, that perhaps we'd fling it wide open and get a lot of people. Possibly. And the other lesson, I think, this year has been that more work before something publishes pays off afterwards. Like I wrote in 2015, I had 6 books out. This year I'm going to have 5, and one of them's a quick read. So I wrote more last year than I've written this year, but it may end up having better results depending on how things go.
It's very hard to tell from the first week because you get lots of focused stuff from all the people who are going to buy it anyway, and very little from the people who haven't heard of it because they still haven't heard of it by now. So it's going to take a while before we can tell if this is a blip or something meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, so for instance, if I went and bought Facebook advertising for Bitter End, which has worked in the past, we've talked about it before, that I made my money back. So before I made my money back, and then some for a little while, but then it started to lose some money, so I just stopped. Whereas if at the end of Bitter End I plugged Origin and said, this is free, and it's the same kind of thing, then it becomes much more profitable because I can plug that, and then they go into Bitter End, and then they finish that and they read Dragons and Magic, and then if there was something else in the similar genre, like maybe they read Dave's Seven Stones, and then they get to the end of that and they read some other fantasy that we haven't written yet. That it's a glorious future, Dave.
I'm happy to build a publishing empire, take over the world.
So that's what I've been thinking about. That perhaps. So I got my post-apocalyptic, and I think I mentioned I got about 75 purchases or something, 50, maybe it was 50. Anyway, I've got some numbers there, but not very much. And I got very few numbers on the vampire thing, like 25 sales, I think, in the first week. So the possibility is that if I turn around now and write a new funny fantasy series as a solo one, and we continue writing our funny fantasy series as a joint, that the two of them will feed off each other and end up boosting the sales of both, especially since we have freebies. So as long as it's perma-free books, you're getting 20 readers a day per series or whatever it happens to be.
Mm.
Anyway, been rabbiting on long enough probably.
Possibly, yeah.
Thank you all very much for watching, and
Bye.
we'll see you next week.